All right, folks, I have been joined by Shaun King. Shaun, I do want to go down the line and introduce all the things that you do, but I don't think I'm capable of doing that. Man, first of all, thanks so much for joining us. Would you just tell everybody about yourself? I know everyone knows you, but I want to humor me and introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, no, man, I'm glad to be on here with you, and I love your work and love the show and the contribution that it's making just to the ecosystem. And I see more and more people are using what you do as their primary source for news. And yeah, so I'm thankful for what you're doing. But people ask me all the time, and I actually love to answer it because, like, when I wake up in the morning, I see myself first as a father. You know, I have 5 kids, and the world I'm learning sees me one way, but over the course of the day, I see myself first and foremost as a dad. And I've been a dad my entire adult life. My wife and I got married when we were in college. Wow. I'm 36 now, but we've had kids since we were 20. And so everything I do, I kind of do from the lens of being a father. We have kids in preschool, elementary school, middle school, and high school. And I think about them when I do what I do, and for a living. Yeah. For a living, I'm not a dad. I work full time for New York Daily News, and I'm the senior justice writer there. And I write 2 articles a day, 5 days a week. And just like you were constantly on the grind, I feel like there's so much injustice in the world that even though I write hundreds of articles a year, I only scratch the surface with some of it. And so, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a writer. And I've always been involved with issues that matter. And while now we're focusing so much on kind of domestic issues, I have a huge heart for injustice all over the world, and have always tried to be an advocate for people who were being wronged in some way or another.
Right on, man. And listen, as you were talking, we've been on, I've been on this particular journey just for about a year, but it's been a long year. And as you were talking, it took me back to something that I wanted to thank you for. And I know in a sense that you may have felt like you were just doing your job, but when my friend Corey Jones was killed, all it took was one message, and you really elevated his story. And I can't thank you enough because I talked to you that Monday morning after killed Sunday night. I talked to you Monday morning about 7 in the morning. And by 11 o'clock, you had that story out with New York Daily News. And you really helped set the tone nationwide for how people saw my friend Corey. And you knew him through me. So I just want to take a moment and tell you, thank you for that. But then there's so many other stories that you have to deal with like that on a regular basis.
Yeah, I'm honored. I'm honored to do that. And, I feel like New York Daily News has given me an opportunity to choose what I write about. And I have no real filter. I have editors who correct my stories for errors and stuff like that. But when they hired me, they really openly said, you pick the stories, you pick the tone. And so every day I'm writing about stories that I feel like otherwise might slip through the cracks, that might not be told from the perspective of the victim. And New York Daily News has given me an opportunity. I call white supremacy out every single day. I don't even know if white supremacy was being printed in New York Daily News until they hired me. But they allow me to call it for what it is, and so I appreciate the opportunity. But it gives me some peace as well, because I try to connect with as many of these families who are affected by injustice, and sometimes they know, and this angers me, but they know that sometimes the best they can do is at least have their story told. And I try to tell it in a way that's tilted toward them and not tilted toward the people who victimize them. And that's the way your local media does it, and local media does it all around the country. They're fed these stories by police and prosecutors, and they tell it from that angle. And so I try to tell these stories from the perspective of family and of the victims.
Yeah. And that was such a huge contribution to so many other stories. Like, I mean, you've been on the beat for a very long time, bringing light to a lot of stories that I honestly believe that if you hadn't put your voice on it or put your amplification on it, they would not have been heard, at least not in the manner that they were heard. Right? We maybe we would have got around to it. Maybe some of the other people with large platforms would have got around to it. But it's like you're relentless. You know, I was talking to my friend Yvette Carnell about you, and she was like, one thing about Shaun stays on it. He's not going to stop. He's going to address justice and injustice no matter what. And that type of tenacity is something that that really has elevated the police violence, the injustices across the country. And I'm not just blowing smoke. I'm really talking about my personal experience. If you had not elevated Corey Jones's story on that day, they could have written an entirely different narrative about him, other than the reality
Absolutely.
that the family knew him as.
And yeah, absolutely, man. And when I saw it and when you reached out to me that morning, I feel like I knew him. Like I was a pastor for almost 15 years. I worked every week, week in and week out, with church musicians and drummers and keyboardists. And so when you told me about him, like I feel like I knew this guy. I know every church musician I ever hired. Yeah. They were doing gigs on Friday nights and gigs on Saturday night and loading their equipment into their car. And they're entrepreneurs and loading their equipment into their car, working late into the night on Saturday night / Sunday morning, and still showing up and serving the church on Sunday. And I knew right away that was who Corey was. And then I found out he was related to a Morehouse brother that I went to school with. And actually, when I was a student at Morehouse, our quarterback, he and our quarterback were cousins. And the world is small, man, and that's what social media does. Right. And there is a window, like, they say if somebody in your family is ever kidnapped, they say it's almost smarter to hire a publicist than it is to hire an investigator. Because getting the word out means everything. And it's the same way with injustice, man. Like there's a small window for me and you and everybody who loves justice for us to define the narrative. And if we don't do it, somebody else is going to do it for us. And before we know it, they're going to say Corey was a thug, Corey was a gangster, Corey had drugs, Corey. I mean, no telling, they could have said anything. Right. And we had to get ahead of that and say, nah. You killed an amazing dude. Yeah. And that shaped it. And even though justice still has not been had in that case yet, it has shaped the local narrative and caused his name to at least be familiar to a lot of other people. And I tell you, I am troubled though, because and you may have seen me tweet this, man. I've spoken at colleges all over the country over the past few months. And I asked a question rhetorically back in February to students. I said, how many of you can tell me the name of one police brutality victim from 2016? Wow. And nobody could name a person. And so I started asking it at every college that I spoke at. And even I spoke at a college last week. Nobody can name one police brutality victim, but it's still going on, man. I mean, we've had hundreds of people shot and killed by police this year, and the media has toned it down. Yeah. And for a lot of really complicated reasons, some activists have also shifted away from talking about the real cases of police brutality, and it's doing those families a disservice. And I have those families reach out to me on a regular basis and ask me, like, why is nobody talking about my loved one? And they expected people to do for their loved one what we did for Freddie Gray or what we did for Sandra Bland. And in a way, it seems like, and I could be wrong, but it feels like that wave has passed. And there are a lot of reasons why that is, but I'm concerned about it for sure.
That's something. And maybe on another show, we'll talk about some of those complicated reasons. Yeah. But I feel you on that. It's definitely, and I'm wondering how much the election is playing the elections across the country, but the presidential election, of course, is just really sucking the oxygen out of the room in terms of cases. And you know what? It's that's really tragic, man. I find myself not knowing where to start in terms of the names. Like there's so many. And it's just heartbreaking to know that some of those names have already, or a lot of those names have already been forgotten.
But I think people are exhausted too. I'm sorry, man. I think people are beat down too, man. 2015, not one police officer was convicted in all of 2015, in spite of 1,100 killings. And I think the injustice wore people down in ways that none of us quite saw coming. Mm-hmm. And I think we're kind of on the other. I think you're right. I think the presidential election was part of that. And I think some of it was just psychological exhaustion from that constant stream, man.
Yeah. It does wear you down. It chips away at your soul a little bit, just case by case by case. 2015 was an overwhelming year in general. And I can imagine for, just me even getting on the air talking about it was exhausting. But guys who have to live it and write it and just kind of carry the burden of maintaining a narrative nationally. I know that had to be exhausting for you as well. Let me shift to let me shift the conversation.
Sure, man.
Take us somewhere else. You mentioned that you were a preacher for 15 years. I'm sure most people have already figured this out about me, but so I come from the church as well, right? I used to be a preacher back in the day. I want to ask you, what do you think it is about you people like me who come from the church but aren't really in the church? We're doing our thing now. We're doing our justice issues. We're facilitating change, but we're not doing it from the church. And then you see Black Lives Matter. A lot of people have asked the question, like, where's the church? Where are the pastors? What are your feelings on that in general?
Man, I have a lot of thoughts about it. It on one level, it breaks my heart because the church really all the way back to, even if we looked at early abolitionists, were often deeply Christian and deeply committed to God through the church. And we go back to, even all the way back to Nat Turner, of people feeling like their faith was a huge part of what motivated them to do what they were doing. And then if we look at the civil rights movement, particularly, it was so central to the movement and even to the early student movement. But what we're dealing with now is altogether different. And I'm troubled that the church plays such a small role in this current movement that we're in, man, because some of the greatest leaders of this Black Lives Matter movement, and I've spoken with them about this, they don't even feel welcome in most churches. Some of it is most churches, like let me tie a little loop here. If we looked at that bill that recently became law in North Carolina, this anti-LGBT bill, there were 7 or 8 black male legislators who voted for it. And those men, in a way, kind of represent Black evangelicals. Okay, I'm not talking about like the guys who endorsed Trump. I'm talking about, they represent in a lot of ways your traditional Black church that is rather anti-gay. Now, they will never say that. They will never admit this anti-gay theology that dominates what they do. But so they voted against it. And so a lot of these leaders in this Black Lives Matter movement are gay and lesbian and trans people who would not feel welcome in the church. And even early in Ferguson, there were a few churches that did step up, but there were even some weird moments there where church leaders really have such a tie. This is hurtful to say, but today often have a real deep tie to the establishment. And a lot of church leaders are connected to the mayor, connected to city councilmen, connected to these police chiefs. And so when young leaders in Ferguson and all over the country, in New York, in Minneapolis and other places, stepped up to protest, the first people that police chiefs and mayors went to was the Black
church. Yep.
And So all of a sudden, a lot of local young people, kids often, felt like, whoa, we're out here protesting the powers that be, and only to find out that the powers that be are deeply connected with the church.
Right.
And so it's problematic, man. And I know I've had a lot of pastors reach out to me and say, Shaun, how do we get involved? How do we contribute? But I feel like, in a sense, the church really missed an essential moment. And it still breaks my heart. You know, I'm not an active part of a church. I still love God. A lot of what I do because of my faith. Like, I feel like Jesus fought for justice. I feel like Jesus was the victim of a political execution.
Yep.
The machine was against Jesus, and I feel like the message of Jesus could be so relevant right now, and there are a few people telling it, but I feel like a moment has been missed, and it doesn't have to stay that way. But
right,
it's problematic, man. The Black church today is way more a part of the establishment than I ever imagined it would be.
And it's funny you say that. I talk about this all the time. There's a Democratic Black establishment, and it's not just a political establishment. It is a political establishment that extends into the Black church.
Yeah.
But you bring up a point that is so salient. The community leaders, the police officers, the police chiefs, the mayor, as soon as something goes down in the Black community, they rush and get the Black pastors to come and assuage the anger, to make everyone nice and calm and docile, as some of my friends like to say. And they kind of, for lack of a better word, neuter the movement, or at least cut off at the knees, where previously the Black church has been a force for change. Now it's almost a force for complacency. And just me, I mean, I wanted to ask you that because for me personally, I could not see getting the work done that needed to be done from the Black church. And that's a real sad indictment because of the role the Black church used to play historically.
Yeah. Like, for instance, all over the country, I'm in Atlanta right now, but I see this in New York as well. All over the country, local activist organizations sometimes just struggle with a place to have a meeting. and I mean this all over the country, just struggle to figure out where can we go. So they end up having meetings outside, meetings at a Starbucks and booted out of the Starbucks, when literally our cities have hundreds and hundreds of churches all over the place. And so that's what previously the church was an incubator, in a sense, for the movement. Now, the beautiful thing about the church not dominating this movement is that there are voices and people and personalities that I'm almost 100% sure would have been squashed a long time ago.
Yeah.
If the church did lead this, the three amazing women who started the hashtag Black Lives Matter and have formed an organization around that, I don't even know if this was a male patriarchal, if this was dominated by men with suits and ties,
right?
I don't even know that a lot of our most important voices would have had the space. So that's not to say, good for the church, because they didn't do that on purpose. But the church's mistake created an opportunity for a lot of men and women to rise up that I think would have never been allowed to be heard from otherwise. And so it was the church's loss, and it was the gain of a lot of sisters and brothers who deserved this opportunity and who have shined. Like, there are men and women that I have butted heads with, including DeRay and Netta and others, who I think if it was all about being a church dominated,
it would never have happened.
They'd have never had this opportunity, man.
Yeah, you're right about that. And I can't agree with you more. It's a shame. I think about the civil rights movement, and I think of people like Bayard Rustin and James Baldwin, some of the most brilliant voices of the day not giving, they took their rightful place. They had to go and snatch their rightful place, but they were not, some of the opportunity was snatched away from them because of their sexuality, and we were like we were robbed of even more greatness and even more potential. So I you know what, I have to agree. I co-sign with that, man. It's actually, it worked out exactly the way it needed to work out, so that the church did not hinder the movement, and now the church has to find, if it's going to find it at all,
right,
work to find its place in the movement. So I think that's a dope and observation that you made there.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about two more things, and then I'm saving Bernie Sanders for last, because I know everybody in my room for the most part, is a Bernie Sanders supporter. But I want to ask you about Justice Together.
Yeah, man. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, I was not on the internet, for lack of a better word, during that phase. So I've had to do a lot of research on it, and listening to you and listening to others. And I guess I only have one simple question, and it may not even be well, I'll let the audience decide what kind of question it is. Here's my question. I've read extensively your I don't want to call it an explanation, but it's documentation of how things went down, how things came apart, and your accountability for your role in it. And yet there still seemed to be a dissatisfaction with that. I understand organizations starting with great potential and not meeting that potential. That happens every day in America, right? And it happens so many times. I've done it myself. But the accountability and the transparency that I felt that you tried to bring,
that's right.
Still felt like there was a big gaping hole in the hearts of the people that were working with you. And I want to know, what do you think about that gaping hole? Is there a gaping hole? And what would you say to the people who still feel slighted by Justice Together? And I'm sorry to my audience, if you guys don't have all the information, you're gonna have to do like me and just go research. We're not going to explain the whole story today.
Yeah. Well, let me give it a little context, man. I'm glad you asked me about it. And I have very sincerely tried to be as open and informative about every mistake and every success that I've had. I've tried to be as forthright about it as I could. The concept for Justice Together, which I still think in theory is a beautiful concept. Even thinking about it now almost makes me want to go try it again. The idea was that I believe there are millions of people in this country who are frustrated about injustice, but don't know what to do about it.
Right.
And they look at the people that are doing something about it, and they don't quite feel like, okay, I don't think that's how I'm going to do it, but I'm bothered, I'm troubled, I'm concerned, I'm frustrated. What do I do? And that at first it came from a lot of people in my own personal network. Professionals, people in careers who actually had money and resources to make a difference on these issues, even political connections, but just felt like, I don't know if protesting or doing sit-ins or die-ins or marches, I don't know if that's the thing for me. So the concept for Justice Together was to bring together at least thousands or tens of thousands of those people. And we were going to create basically chapters in all 50 states and every major city around the country. And I think the spirit of that, the idea of that, is really good. And it should have been able to happen. The problem is we were doing all of that virtually and managing teams, if you will, of people all over the country that I had never met and had never met me. And it became really difficult for me personally to know who was real and who wasn't. And we started noticing right away that some of the people who said they were A, B, or C weren't that type of person. We started noticing, even on white supremacy boards and others, people posting our emails and our private messages and stuff there. So I got to a point where I had a hard time emotionally knowing who is real here. Who can I trust and who can't I trust? And then two things happened right in the middle. 3 days before we got ready to launch Justice Together, Breitbart and others launched this big attack on me about my race. And it was no small thing. It was literally the top news story in the country for 2 days. And And that threw me for a major loop, not just during those 2 days, but it threw my family and I for a loop for several weeks. And until you experience something as crazy as having that level of media focus on you, it would be hard for people to understand how that could throw you for a loop. But then something else happened. And after we launched Justice Together, I began seeing right away that I was going to have a really difficult time managing it because I got hired by the New York Daily News. And so between my personal challenges with the issues about my race and background and the media focus, my struggles of knowing who I could trust among a lot of these virtual volunteers, if you will, and then taking on this new career path of New York Daily News that I didn't seek that job out. They recruited me and I took the opportunity. It became clear to me right away that I was going to really struggle to make something competent and something that could withstand muster and scrutiny. It was clear to me that I was going to struggle with that. And so we moved on. And a lot of the people there really wanted to hold on, man. My family making weird faces and stuff at me back in the back. I'm sorry, man. I thought they were trying to get my attention, but it just became difficult, man, for me to push through that phase and still manage it with the integrity that it deserved. And so when I stepped down from that, it was not a lack of heart, but it was actually because of my heart and my desire to do it in a way that I thought could withstand scrutiny and honor the work that we were trying to do. It needed somebody who could do that and that alone. And so I had to make a strategic decision to either close it down and, just completely close it, and which we did, like legally, physically, completely shut it down, or pass it on to some of the people who said, hey, we want to do this. But because I didn't really know those people, I struggled to feel like that was okay. My hope was whatever work we had done, if they wanted to do that on their own, they could, but not under this legal entity that we started. It was because Justice Together was not just a name. It was a legal 501c3. It had a board. It had, it was an actual operation. And even for our board and others, I feel like the best thing for us to do was to close it.
So I identify with that on so many levels, not on a national level, but on your commitment to starting something for the good of the community and having to walk away from it because of personal reasons. And it usually is tied to career reasons, right? I've had to walk away from something very similarly. So when I saw it going down and I was reading about it, I could identify from the perspective of your lens because I've been in that lens, just not for the rest of the world to see.
And here's what I try to tell people, man, is that I paid the worst price for shutting it down. Like, as frustrated as people were for themselves and as hurt as they were for themselves, I took a really big public hit. Like I took a lot of criticism for it. So I took the brunt of that hit, and I knew that was coming, but it was also an emotional death, if you will, for me. It was something that I wanted to do. It's something to this day that I still feel very strongly about, that we have not been able to turn a corner to get a mass of America behind some key issues. And a lot of people, they care and they're bothered, but we haven't been able to turn that corner. And that's what I hope Justice Together could do. And I've just owned it, man. People ask me about it when I speak, and it was a failure on my end to manage that with everything else. And I wish it had gone differently. We literally refunded every single donation that anybody ever gave to us, which And when we did that, I thought like, okay, once we refund every donation, like every single dime, even people who gave $1 or $3 or whatever, I thought that would shut down a lot of the criticisms, but it didn't, you know. And so we did our best.
That's really the crux of my question was, you know, reading your accounting for it, because you've been pretty transparent, and you're even transparent now in terms of your part in shutting it down and the need to shut it down for you. You're owning it. So not only did you own it, but you also gave great accounting for what happened. So then my question still remains, what do you say to those people who still feel like Shaun King, I hate to use it, but it was out there for like hell for a month. Shaun King let me down. They still feel like that. What do you want to say to them?
Man, you know, I think there's some truth to that, you know, and some of the people who felt let down, my thing publicly was never to say, well, no, I didn't let those people down. Like I have always tried to say, like, one, I wrote to everybody on our email list, almost 15,000 people, a kind of a detailed accounting and apology for being where we were. And then even to that group privately, there was a group of maybe 50 or 60 people who said, hey, to us, we're not just a little bothered, we're really bothered by this. And I wrote that group an apology and attempted to kind of say, you know, what can we do to move forward in a way that's peaceful? And I think in some ways, people just felt like they needed to be heard. And I never made any attempt publicly to discount those people, to discount their frustrations, to say like, hey, these people are wrong.
Yeah.
And in a way, that was just my decision to say, listen, these people say they're frustrated. I have no choice but to believe them and accept their frustrations. I've apologized more times than I even thought was necessary. Even to this day, that's not how I wanted it to go. But I assure you, if I had to do it all over again, that was the best I had at the time. Like you know, there was not a moral failure. There was not a character flaw there. It was a really difficult moment, and working my way through it, I just thought that was the best thing I could do. And I think if Justice Together was alive today with me at the helm, it would be a mess. And I saw that back then and thought to myself, I have too much to lose. The people who were associating with this have too much to lose. And the cause has too much to lose. Yeah. Let's just shut it down and move forward and allow other people to step up. And I would do it. You know, I would do it all over again, and I would try to tweak it to be more sensitive. But some of those folk were going to be frustrated no matter what, man.
Yeah, I like what you said, man. I like your answer to that. And thank you for sharing that with us, because you have no obligation to even talk about it. So thank you for that. But two, I love the way you just put it. For the people who felt like you let them down, you just said, yeah, I did let you down. But, you know, there is life after that, though. You know what I mean? There's an ability to move forward and to continue to do good work. So I just want to thank you for taking the time to talk about that. And again, you didn't have to. So unless you have something else to say about that, let's go to something. Let's talk about Bernie Sanders for a minute, and then I'm gonna let you go.
Sure, man.
Bernie Sanders.
Sure. Yeah, let's go, man.
You've come out in full support of Bernie Sanders. You're feeling the burn. There's so many. I mean, we probably could talk about Bernie Sanders for the next hour, but I'm not going to do that to you. So what are your thoughts on the Sanders, on the race, on the black vote in this race? Just give me the rundown.
Man, so many thoughts. You know, I've said this publicly. This time a year ago, I probably could fit what I knew about Bernie Sanders in 3 or 4 sentences. Like I basically knew that he was like a disheveled socialist from Vermont. Yeah. Like that's kind of all I knew about him. And I knew that he was really serious about being a senator. Mm-hmm. And that he was different and he took his job very seriously. I'd seen him on a couple lists of like the poorest people in the Senate. I'd seen that type of stuff about him, but I didn't even know enough about him to be like that guy. And and so when the race came, I was just open. There was a part of me that felt like I was hoping, I don't know who I was wanting to run, but I was hoping that there were going to be a good selection of candidates. Like I was hoping maybe that Elizabeth Warren would run, for instance. And but I knew that with Hillary running, that most people would not want, including Elizabeth Warren, would not want to get in her way, if you will, because the system, the establishment had really kind of designated that it was her time.
Yep.
And so there was a real part of me that felt like, man, I just wish there'd be some great people to get in the race. And so when Bernie Sanders got in the race, literally, I watched him make his announcement, and I was with my wife the day he announced he was running. And man, we just cracked up because he just had like a microphone set out in the grass by himself. And he's like, yeah, I'm announcing I'm running, and I got to go back to work. And like there was nothing special about it.
Right.
And even, but right in that moment, it kind of endeared me to him. I was like, this guy really is altogether different. And the more I listened to him, just for myself, the more I began to trust him. And the more I listened to people who had known him for years, I began to take him seriously. And I actually wrote a few public critiques of Bernie when I was working for Daily Kos. Several times sisters interrupted his speeches. And I wrote several. I had not endorsed him, and I had not yet planned on endorsing him. I felt like the people who interrupted him were right to do so, and I felt like his platform was missing some really key elements that dealt with discrimination, that dealt with police brutality, that dealt with racial injustice, and I felt like as good as a guy as I thought he was, like I had no questions about his character, I felt like his platform was really lacking. And right there was a pivotal moment for me, man, because after he got interrupted once, I think it was in Seattle, and another time, I think they were in Arizona at the conference, I saw him really begin to listen and learn and adapt the issues that mattered to me. And by this past August, he released what I thought was an amazing platform dealing with injustice.
Yeah.
And when he released it, I had a real open mind. I was not on board for him. And I was still at that time, even open at the time to supporting Hillary Clinton. I had an open mind to the idea. I planned on supporting somebody. But when I saw that platform, I was blown away by it. And I thought, even though I know he may or may not have written every word of it, I saw him in the days and weeks after that platform was released speak about that platform as if he knew it and owned it and believed in it.
Yeah.
And it was, if I had written it myself, whoever did write that, and I have an idea of some of the people who were at that table, they just did an amazing job addressing the issues that mattered most to me. And then as I saw him speak about those issues all over the country, time and time again, I felt good about it. And it was right about that time people started saying, like, hey, Shaun, did you know that he was a real activist in the 1960s? Like that, not that he was a pretend activist or considered it. Did you know that this guy was leading sit-ins? He was leading protests. Did you know that this guy was being chained to women in protest in inner city Chicago, that he was the head of a chapter of SNCC? I didn't know that stuff. I didn't know. You know, and people told me, you know, did you know that he was one of the only people to endorse Jesse Jackson in 1984 and in 1988, and that he didn't just endorse him, but hosted campaign events for him and spoke eloquently about it. And all of that, I didn't know his history. And when I saw that, it got me, man. And
Well, let me ask
And then lastly,
right there.
yeah, go ahead, man.
Give me that lastly. Give me that lastly.
Yeah, lastly, I actually believe all of the other platform that he has where he talks about economic injustice, the healthcare for all, college for all, like those things. I actually really like those things. And all the things he talks about, corruption on Wall Street, his votes against the war, like before he added a justice component to his platform, I actually liked all the other things that he stood for. I just thought there were some pieces that were missing. And it was when he added those pieces that were missing, I felt like, when he added them, and then I learned that he wasn't pandering, but that he was actually a legend, that he had a deep history of activism.
Don't say that though.
Yeah.
Don't say that because okay, this is where I got to jump in, because how was it that you were able to hear about his activism and not be turned off by, people explaining to you that he was this civil rights? Because that seems to be the play right now, right? They don't want to hear anybody tell you about Bernie Sanders activism because, what has he done for us lately? All these little games that we play, and we don't have to go into all the minutia of it, but how were you not turned off by people trying to tell you about Sanders?
Well, it wasn't even so much that, like, I saw the videos and not just videos and pictures, man. It was deep. It was deeper. Although all of that stuff mattered to me, what I saw in him was a real consistency of character.
Thank you.
In the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, in the 2000s, and even though it's a lot to say, we're talking about a man who has a 50-year history of protesting the wrongs of the world every chance he gets. And because he was not a household name, I did not know that he didn't just do what he did in the 60s. What he did in the 60s fueled the way he led in the 70s, 80s, and 90s and 2000s. And then I began hearing all of these clips of him speaking on the House floor, on the Senate floor, and speaking with like passion and anger and eloquence. And then I realized, I said, this is the same dude who was getting arrested in 1960. That he was, the way he spoke out against the prison reforms of the 80s and 90s, the way he spoke out against poverty during those times, it was as passionate as anybody in the House or Senate from those decades. And I've gone to see who else was speaking like that with him. He was speaking against apartheid. He was speaking against injustice in America. And it wasn't that I don't see him or any politicians as flawless candidates, but I am deeply skeptical of all politicians. And for me, he is about as trustworthy. And I think that's what young people are great judges of character, man. And young people that are 35, I'm 36. So people that are 35 and younger are supporting him almost, 8-1 because they see him and they trust him. And what they saw, the same thing I saw, was like, when this guy speaks, I believe him. And most of us don't naturally, innately believe what most politicians say. And so when people say, what have you done for me lately? Most of that is still a lack of education about what he did do and what he fought for in the House, in the Senate, and in his personal life. He will be our last chance to have a presidential candidate who was a civil rights activist in the civil rights movement, if you will. And because after Bernie, we are pretty much past the age of having someone from the civil rights movement who could run for president. And so all of that stuff matters to me, man. And then it, as funny as it may sound to people now, I'm a huge Killer Mike fan. And I listen to Killer Mike, and Killer Mike's really astute politically. And Killer Mike picked up on Bernie before I did, on Bernie's authenticity and his record. And when Killer Mike came out and endorsed Bernie, it impacted me. And then lastly, I did an interview with a woman named Nina Turner. Yep. And Nina Turner was a great politician and leader in Ohio. And I hopped on the phone with Nina one day, and I did not know really what to expect. And she was the most authentic, genuine woman. And she ran down all the reasons why she decided to support Bernie, even though she had pretty much supported Hillary before and in previous campaigns.
Right.
She had a huge impact on me. Killer Mike did as well. And I made up in my mind that I was not going to be a fly on the wall in this election, that I was not going to be a bump on the log. I was not going to just be quiet. I was going to step in and do something. And so I just decided, hell, if I'm a jump in, I'm gonna go all for it. Yeah. And fight for him as much as I can.
Awesome, man. That is I had a chance to I had Nina Turner on the show about I guess a Super Tuesday ago. So not the last Super Tuesday, but Super Tuesday before that. And when I tell you, I've been supporting Bernie Sanders quietly throughout the summer because of his progressive economic policies. That's just my thing. And then I came out supporting him full-fledged when I saw the media games. But listening to Nina Turner talk about Bernie Sanders, like just a few weeks ago, really reignited my passion for it. So I want to give a shout out to Nina Turner for that interview she did with you, because she helped bring you all the way, Killer Mike, because it's that passion, man. It's that passion that people connect with, the sincerity that you spoke of. People want to see sincerity. And I feel, you said this is one of our last chances to get a candidate who's been a part of the civil rights movement. I also feel like this is our last chance to get a candidate that is not baked into the system, right? It's just he's coming from a different perspective in his whole worldview, and so that's why I've just thrown my support behind him. But listen, man, I've held you at least for like 40 minutes now, so I really appreciate you coming on.
I enjoyed it, man. It didn't feel like 40 minutes, man.
Yeah, no, it didn't. And somewhere my producer is going to start shouting in the room, it's time to end the show. Not tonight. I still got another interview to do after this, so we're going into overtime tonight. But Shaun, listen, thanks so much for joining us. I'm glad you can make it here, and I know everybody knows how to get up with you, but it's just my thing. Tell everyone how to get up with you and where they can find you.
Yeah, man. You can find me on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, all with my name, Shaun King, ShaunKing. And I write 2 articles a day, 5 days a week for New York Daily News. And I try to keep it as kind of real and raw and transparent. Sometimes I'm reporting just the hard news, but infusing my own thoughts and opinions into it. And but I tweet those stories, share them on Facebook, and people can connect with me anytime. And then you and I always stay connected and are sharing back and forth privately. And so if I can ever do anything to support you, to support the show, or to support any issues, just let me know.
Man, don't say that, because I'll be hitting you up as soon as the show is over.
Yeah, hit me up.
All right, man. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Shaun King. I know everybody watching knows how to get up with him, but like I said, that's just my thing. I like to ask my guests to give out their hashtag and whatnot. Shaun, thanks so much, man. You're always welcome back anytime you can make it.
Yeah, thanks, man. Take care.
YouTube. All right, folks, 857-600-0518.